So,
Well, I think gold that we hit peak gold in 2015. I think their study showed that we did, or we have. So we'll have to see what happens from here on out. But it's very, very tough to replace ounces quickly.
howdy, folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Thursday, October the 13th, 2016. And I have the great honor of welcoming to the show for the first time the former CEO of Timmins Gold Corporation, where he was responsible for taking the company from junior developer to producing 100,000 plus ounces of gold. And he's also the former CEO of Silver Mex Resources. And he has now moved on, and he is the chairman of the board for Inca One Gold. And you can find them at inca1.com, and they are listed on the Toronto Ventures Exchange under the symbol IO. And of course, I'm speaking about chairman of the board, Mr. Bruce Bragagnolo. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rory. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and we got a lot to talk about, so we're just going to jump right in if you're okay with that.
That's perfect. Thanks.
Chairman of the board. It's like right. Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, right.
And Bruce, I wanted to ask you a little broader picture to start with, and how do you see the economy growing over the next few years, like the next 10 years, or do you see the global economy being stuck in the mud until the Federal Reserve and other central banks come to their senses and normalize interest rates? And is this all going to turn into a currency disaster one day?
Well, let's face it. There's a certain amount of manipulation going on right now, and the Fed, I've got to say, has done a very good job of both keeping the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency and keeping the price of the U.S. dollar up, while at the same time keeping the stock market up. And it's doing it, through basically controlling the message. Every time they need the stock market to go up, they bring in a dovish Fed governor to mention how they don't think interest rates are going up. But then they've got to keep the dollar up, so they march out Jeffrey Lacker, to say how he thinks interest rates should go up soon. So the economies of the world are managed to a large extent now by central bankers and by a lot of government entities, and they've done a pretty good job so far of making sure we don't slip into a recession. Now, the only thing is, there's a lot of money out there that's been created out of thin air, and that hasn't really hit the market yet. If that monetary base really hit the market, we would see a lot of inflation, which we haven't seen yet. So it's really a question of how the Fed and the governments manage inflation in the next few years. They seem to have stopped deflation, but now that money has to hit, and that's why I was so bullish on gold when they started the QE programs. I thought QE3 was going to send gold to the moon, but instead it sent the stock market to the moon, because clearly that's where the Fed and the U.S. government wanted to see the money go. So sometimes things have unintended consequences. So really the question is, how long can the governments of the world and the central bankers intervene to stop what should have been a normal correction in 2008? So there's an unpaid bill here somewhere, and I guess at some point it's going to come due. I just don't know when, because there's a lot of very smart people doing everything they can with lots of weapons to figure out how they're going to keep the economy afloat. And then if things don't work out, well, they just start a war somewhere and keep the people off guard with a war.
Which seems to be brewing as we speak, with the saber rattling between Putin and Obama, between Russia and the United States, or Russia and NATO in Syria. I mean, that whole thing is a disaster, and it seems like they are marching us towards war, come what may. And as far as the economy itself, I think that I personally have been saying that we've been in a recession for quite some time, and had the Federal Reserve not stepped in 2008, we would have experienced a full-blown depression almost immediately, and it would have been great, because at this point we would be coming out of it. But instead, as you pointed out, Bruce, we have an unpaid bill, and that unpaid bill keeps growing, and it terrifies me, the size of that bill, when it actually hits the doorstep and says this is now due. That's the part that scares me
Well,
more than anything.
yeah, it's clear from the American election that's going on right now. That's from all the the politicking going on. It's clear that the American middle class is fed up, and
Fed up.
I don't know what took the American middle class so long to get to the point they're at now, where they're willing to look for an alternative. And it's shocking to me that unfortunately that the country has gotten into the state that it has. The middle class has been gutted. The Democrats, when they and as a Canadian, I naturally lean a little to the left. It's amazing to me that the American middle class has been treated the way it has, and hasn't really said more about it. Hasn't been really talking to the politicians with a little bit more firm a tone than they have, because it's evident now that both the Republicans and the Democrats serve the ruling elite. It's so plain, and there isn't really a voice of change out there. I mean Donald Trump says he's going to change things. I wonder how much his party is going to let him do it.
Exactly.
So it's a bad situation where I think a lot of Americans feel disenfranchised from the political process, because if they vote for Hillary, they're getting more of the same. And if you look at her record, as Trump has pointed out, it's really a history of destabilization of the Middle East, which is where all the saber rattling is taking place right now.
Yep.
And if you look at Donald Trump, I mean, he has his faults as well. So, and I think his party would not support anything he put forward. So it's a tough choice for Americans right now. So, I think in a situation like the U.S. is getting into, I think you really have to look at some way of hedging your bets. And I think gold is a very good way in a situation like you're facing in the U.S. of making sure you've got a little bit of security under your mattress.
Yes, and in your hand, in your possession. And
Yeah,
speaking,
that's right.
I'm glad you brought up the politicians and the presidents, because that's one of my questions. And do you see either of the primary U.S. presidential candidates, either Clinton or Trump, as being gold positive? And if so, why is that?
I don't think it really matters which one of them gets in. Gold is going higher regardless.
Okay.
There has been much money printed. From a strict monetary base, if you look at where the price of gold should be based on money supply in the last few years, from what I read, the number comes out somewhere around $2,600, and that number is probably conservative. At $2,600 gold, the gold industry would be flying, and that'll be a substantial reset in the gold price just to catch up to the monetary base. So I don't know why it is that everything else is going up in price, but gold seems to be very well managed and is not going up. I mean, why is it that food is going up? All the commodities you look at, and I guess oil as well. Oil does seem to be recovering these days, though, and is going up in price. But it does seem like the commodities do get knocked down every couple of years when somebody figures they can make some money off it.
Well, as far as the gold and silver markets, or so-called markets, I mean, we had Deutsche Bank admit in a court of law earlier this year that they have been manipulating the market and in collusion with HSBC and Scotia Macata. And now there's a massive lawsuit that is being brought against, at a minimum, Deutsche Bank for this market manipulation that they have admitted to. So, I mean, the cat's out of the bag as far as that, as far as the reason for gold and silver not being allowed to get to equilibrium, like you were talking about, as far as it getting up to $2,600 an ounce or even higher, and probably should be a lot higher at this point. But
well, anytime you have a paper market that sets the price for a physical product, uh, and you have unlimited shorting in the paper market, yeah, I mean there's potential for manipulation and abuse. We need to get to a physical discovery process for gold. We need price transparency, and we need a physical market. Gold shouldn't even allow itself to be traded the way it is. Calling the COMEX a gold-backed market, it's got nothing to do with gold. All they do is trade paper contracts. It's a casino. They just trade paper contracts back and forth.
And that's all that they do.
I don't know why that has been allowed to set the price for gold. And I think that there's going to be a changing of the guard as the physical gold moves from west to east. We've got the Shanghai Exchange is a physical exchange, so I think the COMEX is going to be depleted fairly soon, and it might vanish. Basically, the COMEX was set up so people could bet on the direction of the gold price and short it.
And short it. I mean, it just, and I'm glad that you brought up the Shanghai Gold Exchange and it being a physical market. That's what I see as well. And there's some very smart people that have said that, the potential for us awakening one morning and there being an arbitrage between, the physical gold at the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the manipulated COMEX quote price discovery mechanism end quote at the COMEX, that there's going to be a fairly good size arbitrage between those two, and at that point that there's going to be problems because you're going to have physical
all
gold.
That would happen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, all that would happen at that point is whoever is on the COMEX would just short the COMEX down some more to bring the physical down. I mean that's what happened when Germany asked for its gold back in 2012. I thought, 2013. I thought that was going to trigger a rapid increase in the price of gold. Instead, I think it triggered the big push down in the spring of 2013, because whoever had to deliver the gold said, "Oh, I can't deliver it, not at this price," because it was up in the 1600s at that point. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Forget that. I'm not going to deliver it here. I'll short it down and buy it and then deliver it." So that's the problem when there's big money around. It can really control a market, even though it's supposed to be illegal. From what I understand, the CFTC is supposed to be regulating the gold price. You're not supposed to be able to manage a price of a commodity in a paper market. You're not supposed to be able to manage the physical commodity in a paper market, and that's what's happening. So, I think the laws are all there, but people need to start enforcing them.
That'd be nice, because they are all the laws and the regulations are on the books. It's just no one enforces it.
Yeah.
All out to lunch. And Whereas I'd like to change gears and take a look at the mining industry as a whole and get your thoughts. Research and development and the exploration. that took an absolute beating for a number of years. And now, like you said, the majors, their pipeline is dry. They have nothing. They literally have nothing except for what is right around them. And so they're going to have to start looking at the juniors and the exploration companies. I mean, they're gonna have to, and they're gonna have to start buying them up. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah,
I mean,
but unfortunately, it's hard to say whether they've got whether the juniors have the size that they seem to require. I mean, the majors have pretty stringent requirements when it comes to making when it comes to purchasing, juniors. They want big, they want big ounces.
I question whether or not there are big ounces left. I mean,
Well, that's it. It's hard. They're hard to find, and that's why the majors are having such a hard time.
yes, and I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, how do you see that trend playing out over the next few years? I mean, if the pipeline is already dry and they have these stringent requirements that they have to follow, I mean, where does that leave the majors, and what impact will that have on the exploration companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Well, what I think we're going to see with the majors is as the price of gold goes higher, they're going to start going back to reducing the cutoff grade and increasing the price they use. So that's going to bring a lot of ounces in. I mean, Pascua-Lama is a prime example. They use $1,600 for the pit design, and if we get, when we get past that again, there's a big deposit that's going to come on. I think that's 10 million ounces. So we're going to see more of that, but we need higher prices to bring a lot of gold ounces online. And then of course you've got to build it. So you've got to build the mine. You've got to go through the permitting process, all of that. So there is going to be a tightening of supply in gold in the next few years. There's no doubt about it.
I would agree with that as well.
Production's in decline, and
right.
The other thing is, if the underground mines have been getting most of the attention from investors in the last few years, but underground mines have a set amount of gold. Basically, it's in the veins. It's very hard to decrease the cutoff grade in an underground mine because you're either in the structure or out of it. But the open pit mines, I think, are going to get more attention because they're the mines that benefit the most from higher gold prices because they have more ounces. So anybody that can increase their ounces by reducing their cutoff grade or increasing the price they use is going to get more ounces in the next few years.
And I want to turn to Inca One. And Bruce, what separates Inca One from other gold producers?
Well, Inca One has a very unique model. Inca One is a toll milling company. So what it does is it charges the miners that deliver the ore. It doesn't mine the ore itself, so it's taken that risk out of the equation, and it's somewhat of a financial services company at present. What it does is it buys the ore from the miners at a discount. And the beauty of it is that the higher the price of gold goes, the greater the discount, to the point where the net revenue margin can be as high as 40%, depending on the price of gold. So instead of running the risk of mining and getting involved in the nitty gritty, it simply buys the ore from the miners at a discount, processes the ore, and sells it. So the only issue that the company has had in the last few years has been cash flow. And it recently cleaned up its balance sheet by taking $11 million of debt and converting that into shares. There was a consolidation of shares, and now it's only got 57 million shares outstanding. So it's got only $3 million left in debt. It's got 57 million shares out, which is not a lot for the gold industry. And it's got a working mill, and it's got experienced people on the ground. So, you have to know what type of ore you're processing, and these guys are very good at it on the ground. And management has gone through the growing pains with the mill. They know the country very well, and the operations team has got the mill running very well now. So really, everything's going very well operationally. The only issue was short-term cash flows, and those have all been addressed now. So, it's a company on the rise. I first saw the presentation on Inca One 2 years ago, and I really liked the story at the time, and I've been following it ever since. So when the opportunity arose to become chairman, I gladly accepted. So and that's just the start. So the company is moving towards positive cash flow, and positive cash flow stops dilution. For one thing, you don't have to keep issuing shares to raise money. And the second thing it does, it allows you then to go out and look for other projects. And that's what I'm excited about is what opportunities are out there that can be sourced and acquired I think right now with the prices of of the metals where they are, the prices of assets are actually quite attractive. And we're looking actively now for development projects that may not be a standard toll milling operation, but will expand into actual development and eventually mining.
It sounds like you've got a good plan, and it sounds like things are moving in the right direction on all fronts. I mean, driving down debt and getting the operation up where it needs to be, and now it's time to start scouting for new properties. I like it.
Yeah, it's it's taken a little bit of time. The mining industry requires a bit of patience sometimes. It requires the right environment, both on pricing of gold and the ability to raise money. So this restructuring is a real milestone for the company. And management has done a very good job of accessing properties where we've got a short list we're looking at right now, or new projects, and I'm quite enthused about the quality of the projects that they're bringing in. So I think in the next little while we'll be making a decision whether any of those meets the criteria we're looking for.
Sounds good. And are you a precious metals bug? I mean, do you own physical metal as well?
Of course. No, I think it's essential to have at a minimum a certain amount of gold around to last you just in case you get some type of a crazy event. I mean, and when I say that, I say just look at New Orleans. What happened there? There's a few things you need in the event of a bit of a breakdown, and I think having a few gold and silver coins around for the cost of it is good insurance.
Great insurance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I certainly I usually travel with a gold coin, to tell you the truth, and just to have one around. So
well,
it's always good to have some physical gold close, because if you don't have it close, you'd never know when you're going to need it, and it's just such good insurance to have some hard currency that you need to if you ever need it.
And it's accepted anywhere you go.
That's one of the greatest things about gold. It's good everywhere.
It's good everywhere.
Gold in India, that's why the Indians use it so much. They use it as a currency as well as an investment.
Yep.
Their currency gets devalued or goes up and down all the time, but the price of gold stays fairly constant. So if you're transferring gold, they have a lot of gold brokers over there apparently. where if you are doing a major transaction, you do it in gold because you don't have to worry about devaluation while the transaction is taking place.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I love gold for that reason. I mean, I like it because it's completely opaque. Not that I'm trying to hide anything, but my business is my business, and the fact that that it is money and that it's accepted anywhere in the world. It is truly a one world currency. It is a one world money, and I don't know what else to say. I mean, if you can't get behind that idea, then okay.
Yeah, and it's been around for a long time.
Long time, thousands of years
Yeah.
it's been happening. And
Yep.
what do you think gold's role will be in 10 years? I mean, will it play a more dominant role in the world with rising east and collapsing west? I mean, how do you see gold's role playing out in light of what we were discussing just a moment ago?
Well, there's a number of things that could happen. Uh, One thing I've seen lately is just a population boom. I don't know what the statistics are, but it just seems like everywhere is getting busier. If you drive a car anywhere, you're stuck in bigger traffic jams. So there's just more people around. So more people means more demand for gold. So I think on a supply and demand basis, you're going to look at higher prices just because of increasing demand and decreasing supply. Uh, but the real buyers of gold these days seem to be the central banks, and they want it because of currency fluctuations, and they need to build up their gold reserves because gold is accepted as the only real true form of money. I mean, a piece of paper used to say, the U.S. dollar used to say it was redeemable in gold, but no longer. So you actually have to have the gold in order to back it up. And it's an interesting question. I'm really curious as to whether the United States, a country that says it does not believe in gold and has called it a barbarous relic, etc. I'd really be interested to find out how much of that gold at Fort Knox is allocated for the U.S. government. I get the feeling that if they don't really like it all that much, why do they own it?
Exactly. Well, it's our gold. I mean, it's the people's gold. That's that's the theory that we operate under. I mean, the U.S. Treasury transferred ownership of my gold to the Federal Reserve, which is a private banking cabal, and so now the gold actually resides in ownership by the Federal Reserve System, and there's a lot of people that are curious about how much of that 8,100 tons is actually exist. First of all, and if the Treasury, the United States Treasury, which is my Treasury Department, if we actually still own that gold, or if it's been hypothecated and rehypothecated, or leased, or where it's at, because we haven't seen it since 1954, I believe, was the last audit, and the last time that anybody visually saw any gold in Fort Knox was 1973, 74, somewhere around there, I believe.
Yeah, it just seems curious, doesn't it?
It does. It's very, very curious. I mean, if you hate it so much, then open up the vault and let's take a look at your disgust. You know,
Well,
give us a peek.
okay, here's the COMEX. The COMEX right now, I think, is down to what, 60,000 ounces of gold. And there's what, 225 claims on paper for each physical ounce of gold, and that seems to be a pretty good business for the COMEX. Why? Why would the U.S. government or the Fed let that type of business go away by just sitting there on that gold? It doesn't make any sense. My my gut tells me there's all kinds of claims on that gold that the American citizens don't know about. So
Exactly.
I'd be very curious about that.
Well, I mean, and it goes back. You brought up Germany, requesting their gold, in 2013, and the response was, well, it's going to take us 7 years to get you 300 tons. I mean, which is a joke, first of all, and it's it turns out that then Germany's next step was to say, well, we'd like to audit the gold, and they said, well, you can't look at it, you can't audit it. We'll show you one vault, and that's it. But you can't touch anything, you can't audit it, you can only look at it, and we'll show you one vault, and that's it. I mean,
Yeah, it's very strange that would take a matter of a week to transfer 300 tons. That's just so. It just seems so ludicrous that it would take that long.
7 years, and
Yeah.
it's out of control. I mean, just open the vault and let's conduct an audit and be done with it. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're, and we've asked for that to happen, and they said, well, it costs too much. It's going to cost about $15 million to do that by the time you do the assays and all this. And it's like, you spend that in about a minute in Iraq. 15
Well, they
million.
should all be numbered. Those bars should all be numbered and inventoried.
There you go.
But yeah, so I don't see why that would be such a big problem. It can't be that many of them.
Can't be that much.
Anyway, it's just a curiosity. It strikes me as being unusual that a country there or a Federal Reserve that doesn't seem to place any value in gold. Why do they still own it if they don't seem to think it's worth anything?
There you go. Barbarous relic, pet rock, tradition. Ben
Exactly.
Bernanke called it a tradition.
Yeah.
Oh, I like tradition.
Yeah.
We've been speaking with Bruce Bragagnolo, and he is the chairman of the board over at Inca One Gold, and you can find them at inca1.com. And there you can find them listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and their symbol is IO. And Bruce, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that we can do this again in the not too distant future.
Rory, it's been fun. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Well, you have a great afternoon, and I'll get everything edited, and we'll get it published, and I'll send you the link to it.
Great. Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Thanks, Rory. Bye.